oil, floating oil. From there, we can see some additional volumes coming to the market. And third, most importantly, Iran has huge reserves, oil reserves, also gas, but in terms of oil, these are complex fields compared to Iraq, compared to Saudi Arabia, some Gulf countries, but they are huge reserves. And if Iran is able to provide an attractive investment framework, it can increase the capacity. But this will not happen from one day to another. The pace of it will be determined by the investment framework the Iranian government is going to offer. So 3 categories: one, from existing fields; second, from the oil, floating oil on the boats; and the third one will be in the longer term from the new capacity growth. But this will be depending on the investment framework the Iranian government will suggest.
Can you give us some clarity, Fatih, on the state of Iran's upstream sector, its mature oil fields, its energy infrastructure broadly? How badly has it been damaged by the sanctions?
First of all, without going into too much details, but giving a general understanding, from a geological point of view, Iranian fields have steeper decline rates compared to Gulf countries, and they are a bit more complex. This is one. Second, Iran has a long tradition of looking after the oil industry, oil fields, a strong know-how basis, the technology basis. But third, years and years of not having access to the best technology has deteriorated the Iranian existing fields. There is a need for rehabilitation there, but the situation may not be as bad as some of us thought before. But Iran will badly need A, the finance, and B, the technology in order to see a step increase in its production capacity.
And all of this, of course, additional Iranian supply, post-sanctions, does have implications for OPEC. You're an ex-OPEC man on the research side, on the economic side. Their December meeting, is there pressure? How much pressure is on OPEC to cut production, especially if oil prices remain where they are or even fall further, possibly between $40 a barrel? Because a number of GCC countries, and we were talking about this, are suffering at the moment because their budgets will only balance at around $90, $100 a barrel.
So, first of all, OPEC decisions are the decisions of the OPEC governments, and I am sure they will try to get the best decisions for themselves and also for the global energy markets. But the current price levels are a serious pressure on the budgets of several countries in Middle East, especially for those who almost exclusively rely, their economies rely on the oil and gas export revenues. Now, in the short term, of course, they may want to see how they get higher prices, higher revenues, but in the medium and longer term, it may well be a good heads up for broadening and diversifying their economies. Some of them do, some of them are trying to do, but it's an important reminder that the single commodity economies may always face such risks if the prices fall down.
Fatih, let's bring it back to this discussion about renewable energy and the prospects out here in Asia. And we have a question from the floor. what would be Asia's biggest challenge in developing its potential for renewable energy, and how can we overcome it? And if I can just add to that, cheaper oil, cheaper LNG, more abundant LNG, abundant coal, abundant crude oil, is that undermining the case for renewable energy?
So when we look at the renewable energy, it is mainly used in electricity generation. And as such, there is no direct link between the oil prices and renewable energies, as oil is not anymore a major way of generating electricity. Renewables are more competing with coal or natural gas, and both of them see lower prices today. But in many countries, including Asia, we see that the renewables are supported by governments. And China is a very good example here. As a result of that support, today the cost of solar in China in a few years of time went down by a factor of 4. It's a huge decline of cost. So my main suggestion to the Asian governments, if they have a renewable energy support program, to be consistent with that program and don't change that program every 2 years, every 1 year, to give unpredictable signals to the investors. This happened in many OECD countries. Government give a support, the announced support program, but a few years later, they change the program and the investors get mixed signals. Yes, the renewables, when we look at especially solar and wind, they are intermittent, they vary, they may be uncertain in terms of the weather conditions, but the policies which are supporting renewables may be also very uncertain as well. So therefore, if I give one humble advice to the governments, predictability of the renewable support programs are key to have substantial renewable energy penetration in the region.
Can you explain why, Fatih, within China, and we have seen the leadership in Beijing make strides towards renewable energy, they've shaken out and they've cut back polluting, unproductive industry, for instance. Can you explain why we have quite a considerable supply overhang of solar panels in that market? Is the demand just not there yet to absorb the supply?
Demand will come. There is no worry on that. But let me give you one number to understand it, put China in a global context. Again, the renewable energy push came from Europe and United States and other countries. But in 2014, last year, amount of renewable energy investments in China was higher than the renewable energy investment in the United States, plus all European countries put together. So to put it in a context, how important the renewable investments in China were last year and will be in the future. China has two drivers for pushing renewables. The first one is, as you mentioned, for the energy sector, reducing the local pollution and the, in general, environmental footprint of energy sector, and also renewables are a homegrown energy industry. Therefore, for energy security, it is very good that the renewable energy is pushed. This is one. Second, it is an industry, it's a business. China is now, by putting a lot of renewable energy, bring the cost down, Chinese renewable energy technologies will be a major exporting item for China in many countries around the world. And this is not only for renewables, it is the same thing for nuclear power. So when you look at the worldwide today, about half of the nuclear power plants under construction in China bring the cost down in terms of learning by doing, and we will see soon China will be a major player in the nuclear industry, competing with the established players in the world.
Infrastructure constraints, especially when it comes to power generation, distribution, transmission, etc. Fatih, can you speak to us about that? Because this is one of the popular questions that has come out from our audience, and it's this: how far are we from the implementation of an ASEAN power grid?
So, from a point of view of the potential, from a point of view of the economics, and from a point of view of the win-win-win benefits, we are very close. But from a political implementation perspective, we are not yet there. We are, as I mentioned in our report we published 2 weeks ago on ASEAN, we are making the case how beneficial would it be to have such a power grid for ASEAN countries, for every country which would be involved. From an economic side, the optimization of the resources side, and from an environmental side.
We've got a little bit of time left, and I know I'm going to get scolded by the organisers, but I just want to take a few questions from the floor. Could you just say who you are and what organisation or company you're from? Yes, madam, right at the front here.
Is this on? Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Beryl. My name is Barbara Judge, and I was chairman of the UK Atomic Energy Authority. And I wanted to go back to Dr. Beryl's comment about nuclear energy. Could you continue that comment and discuss maybe what role nuclear energy might have to play in the energy mix, not just in the world, but particularly in Southeast Asia, where there is definitely a question about what appropriate energy mix we should have here?
It's a very pertinent question, especially in a post-Fukushima era.
So, nuclear energy is a key technology which would generate electricity without having interruptions, without intermittence problem, and without emitting CO2 emissions. So as such, could make a major contribution to address the climate change worldwide. But we have two problems, or two challenges, I should say. One of them is when you build a nuclear power plant, the capital cost is a bit high compared to other technologies. So as such, finding right financing schemes for the nuclear power plants, built the new ones, will be important. And there's a role for governments to play if they would like to see nuclear to play an important role in their energy mix, which once again would be very good to address the climate change problem, also to reduce the imported energy. Second challenge is still after Fukushima, as you said, there are some thoughts, hesitations within the public. I think there is a need to convince the public that all the safety measures are taken, all the independent regulatory bodies are built to oversee the construction and the operation of nuclear power plants. These are the two challenges I see in front of nuclear to have a higher share in the global energy mix. But if it is done, it will definitely have positive implications for the global emissions problem.
Yes, a couple of more questions. We'll take the gentleman right at the front here, please.
Thank you. Ron, I'm Mohinder Gulati. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of United Nations Sustainable Energy for All. Congratulations, Dr. Birol, as always. Excellent presentation. My question is about carbon, and more specifically, carbon pricing. Before the global financial crisis, there was a thriving carbon price market. It was growing very strong. And then because of the policies of a few governments, it collapsed. Carbon pricing can be a very powerful market tool for creating incentive for the industry to include that externality in their decisions. And I have a two-part question. In Paris, how confident are you that an international agreement could be negotiated on the carbon pricing, setting up carbon pricing? And second, if you include carbon pricing in the number of variables that you looked at, will your prognosis change?
And thank you very much. First of all, you are perfectly right. If there was a carbon price globally, it will be the most efficient way of addressing our climate change problem. Most efficient one, and it will be the easiest one. From a theoretical point of view, this is the answer. However, and however is a big however here, even though many countries, many stakeholders agree that the carbon price will be the best instrument to address this problem, I would be positively surprised in Paris if there was an agreement on a global carbon price as such. There may be different drivers in the longer term to give signals for a need of carbon price from Paris, but an agreement of a global carbon price in Paris would be a very welcome surprise for me. Second, if I show that the renewables are becoming a mainstream fuel, and 2/3 of all new power plants globally in the next 5 years will be renewables. If there was a carbon price, global carbon price, I am sure these renewable shares would be significantly higher, as a carbon price would encourage the renewables and discourage the polluting fuels. Having said that, if I may, we discuss about the carbon price, global carbon price, which would definitely discourage the fossil fuels, but we have still today more than $500 billion of subsidies which incentivize the fossil fuels. So let's don't forget what we have in front of us, and getting rid of those subsidies would be as important as to establish a global carbon price. Because what does it mean, $500 billion of subsidy for fossil fuels? I can tell you, this means paying more than $100 per ton of CO2, an incentive to put carbon in the atmosphere through this subsidization. So therefore, it's a huge challenge that the many countries, G20, APEC, ASEAN countries are working on.
I fear I have to wrap it up there, unless we have time for one more question. Yes? No, all right. I don't want to get into trouble.